Hi, it's Victor Kim, and welcome to our midweek meditation. This week, I wanted to touch a little bit about something that I learned during my course last week at the Vancouver School of Theology with Dr. Cynthia Rigby, of course, who preached at Richmond Church this past weekend. The course was called How Doctrine Matters in Real Life, and I want to just talk about one example of that today. And probably in the weeks and months to come, I'll touch upon some other examples as we go along. Today I want to talk about the doctrine of the resurrection and the second coming. The doctrine of the resurrection and the second coming. And I think most of us who are familiar with the Bible and with Christian faith know that the doctrine of the resurrection and the second coming speaks of a time when the resurrected Jesus will come back, right? Will come back to earth and will usher in a new heaven and a new earth. But how, the question is, if doctrine matters in real life, how do we begin to imagine this newness in a way that we can live into and perhaps even make a contribution to its realization? How do we do that, right? It's hard to imagine because the hope that the resurrection and the second coming points to is something that isn't even close to the kind of life that we live today. The hope that it points to is a time when God will wipe away every tear from our eyes, when there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, right? It's a time when the wolf will lie down with the lamb and they'll eat together. And it just seems so different from the way our world is today. The world that we live in today is a world in which death is far too real. There are far too many tears being shed. There's far too much pain that people suffer. Whether it's issues of the pandemic, COVID-19, whether it's issues revolving around racism or other aspects of inequality or struggle, there seems to be so little harmony. We can't imagine a wolf and a lamb lying down together. In fact, what we can imagine is a world in which the wolf eats the lamb, right? And in this world, you're better off being the wolf than the lamb if you want to survive, and especially if you want to get ahead. So it's so hard to imagine this new world, this new creation, this hope that the doctrine of the resurrection and the second coming point to. So if it's so hard to imagine, how do we live meaningfully? How do we live meaningfully? How does this become our reality? Well, for some people, we might say, why do we have to do anything at all? We could do nothing because God's going to do what God's going to do. What does it matter what we do if God's going to do what God's going to do? What difference could we make anyway? But I think it's always better for us to be participants in the journey than just going along for the ride. It's always better to be participants in the journey than just going along for the ride. John Calvin, the reformer, who we often tend to think of as being pretty dour and pretty serious and pretty sort of down on human nature, was actually, in fact, had a very high view of our human capacity to change. In fact, he had a high view of human nature. And he set expectations high, believing that if we really believed the hope to which we are called, if we can imagine what God is all about and all that God has promised, if we can imagine that, if we can keep our hopes set high, expectations set high, then he says we can come to be changed. We can come to be changed if we live with the reality of God's world in mind. Then this world will become something new. If we truly believe in the reality of what God has promised, then we begin to see this world in a new way. No longer just the way it is, but a place which could be so much more, right? A world which could be so much more. Then if we truly believe this, then we work to alleviate suffering because we believe in the hope that we confess. We imagine how to resolve injustices, how to work for peace. If we believe that wolves and lambs can eat side by side, then we can begin to think differently about violence and war. It's not just the way things are. We can imagine something different. We have to believe that the hope that the doctrine of the resurrection and the second coming declares, we have to believe in that hope. And if we believe in that hope and live in that belief, the world will look different. You know, someone said, if we can't get there from here, right? If we can't get there from here, maybe we might just want to start there and see what happens, right? Dr. Rigby told a story of a band concert that she once attended, which really was a conversion experience for her about Christian hope, she said. It was a band concert that her son was in as a part of a group of 13 and 14-year-olds who were playing a concert at the school. And once the concert had ended, the band teacher, someone named Mrs. C, turned to the audience and said that the school band would be involved in a band festival later on that year, and part of the band festival would be to engage in sight reading. Now, if you've played in any school band like I have, you know that sight reading, the words sight reading, brings sheer terror to the hearts and minds of those of us who tried to fake our way through band, right? I mean, we let the people that really knew what they were doing around us really carry us, and the rest of us just kind of faked our way through it. But sight reading, you can't fake your way through that. Anyway, Mrs. C was telling the audience how she would prepare those 13 and 14-year-olds for this festival and how to sight read. What she did was she had the pieces of music which the band had never seen passed around, and they placed those scores of music on their music stands, but they didn't pick up their instruments. Their instruments were laid down, and then the band teacher began to conduct the band through this music without anyone playing an instrument. And she led them through the music, bar by bar, measure by measure, line by line. And she walked them through, saying, here's where the melody starts. Here's where it goes louder. Here's where it gets softer. Here's where the B flat is actually a B natural. Here's where the tempo increases. Here's where the tempo slows down. And she walked them through that piece of music. And Dr. Rigby said, I could watch as that band became fully immersed in that music. Even though they weren't playing anything, they were fully immersed in it. And then after 8 minutes and the timer went off, Mrs. C got the band to pick up their instruments. And then they began to play that piece of music, which they had seen for the very first time. And they began to play it as if they knew it. Because they did. Because Mrs. C had walked them through it. And what Dr. Rigby said was, it was watching and joining in the celebration and the creation of something that was so beautiful. It was something so beautiful, right? And what she said was that to create beauty, we have to first participate in it. To create beauty, we have to first participate in it. When we know the music of God's hope, when we live then as a people of that hope, when we participate in the beauty of that creation, of that promise, that's when we join in that celebration. That's how we help to create that beauty, that wonder, that hope of God's promised kingdom, right? So, friends, I want to invite us to be a people who really, really know what it is that we hope in, who believe that what God promises, God will deliver. What God promises, God will deliver. I want to invite us to be a people who will live with a hope in us that can console those who are dying, right? Who will live as those who have the hope to support those who are living with pain, to work for justice and equality so that there'll be less pain and less suffering in the world, that we would be a people who would live with the confidence as those who can not only imagine the new creation that God promises, as those who can not only imagine that new creation that God promises, but who will play a part in its realization. Friends, as we move on to the musical meditation, you'll find that in this musical meditation, Gianni Bordetti, our music director at RPC, is actually going to be playing a very interesting piece. It's called Nocturne for the Left Hand, and it's written by some Russian composer, but it's called the Nocturne for the left hand. And I can just watch it, and as beautifully as Jenny plays it, and as wonderful as it sounds with only one hand, I can just imagine the harmony when both hands might be playing. And it just gets me to think, about the harmony of God's creation when we aren't only passengers on the way to the destination that God has in mind, but when we become participants in the journey. So watch the musical meditation and enjoy it. And just want to let you know that next week, since I'm on holidays, it'll be Anne-Marie Ellithorpe, our Director of Children Youth Ministries, who will be doing the meditation. And then the week after that, it'll be Dr. Richard Topping from the Vancouver School of Theology, minister in association with us here at RPC, who will be doing the meditation. And Jenny will be with them both weeks. So enjoy. God bless you. Have a wonderful week.